I was really conflicted when I read the last chapter of Chainsaw Man. Because on the one hand, it was revealed that these last 97 chapters were only one part of a larger story, and that the series would actually continue, so hey, more Chainsaw Man, that's great. But on the other hand, I feel like if this story, the story of Denji and Makima, was given just a few more chapters to really flesh out the ending and shed light on some unanswered questions, I think that Chainsaw Man would have been pretty much perfect. But don't get me wrong, I actually really like the ending that we got, because it cleverly ties together so many themes and elements of the narrative, while also calling back to a lot of character moments that really take on a whole new meaning once you have the context of the ending. Makima's build-up as the true villain is so good. In pretty much every arc, we would see her do some crazy bullshit and reveal another one of her powers, but it was pretty tough to pinpoint exactly what her abilities were, since she seemed to defy all of the known rules of this universe. Couple that with her lack of a clear motive, and Makima becomes one of the overarching mysteries of the story. It wasn't until the Gun Devil arc when we get the big reveal that she is the Control Devil. Immediately, there are so many questions that come to mind, like, how do her powers work? If she's a devil, then why does she just look human? Can she actually make contracts with other devils, or is that some kind of cover-up? But more importantly than that, a lot of aspects about her character and her relationship with other characters start to make sense, the most notable of which for me was Makima's relationship with Hayakawa. Early on in the series, Hayakawa says that he likes Makima, and I was kind of confused about that because he says it like it's a matter of fact, and he doesn't really elaborate or bring it up again. At the time, it struck me as pretty weird, especially since Hayakawa also had Himeno, who he was much closer with and who was very obviously interested in him. And I gotta say, poor Himeno, man, she was just so frustrated with Hayakawa not taking a hint that she either just stopped giving a shit or tried to make him jealous by getting with Denji, someone she literally just met. Also, he's a minor. But the real tragedy is that Himeno died without ever knowing that Makima was literally controlling Hayakawa and manipulating his feelings the entire time. And the scene right before Makima's reveal is so great, because that little doubt I had in the back of my mind finally paid off like 70 chapters later, when Angel asks, "Hey, you like Makima, right?" And without the slightest hesitation, Hayakawa says, "Yeah." But then he thinks about it for a second, and he starts to question himself, wait, why do I like Makima? This one moment creates the perfect atmosphere and tension leading up to Makima's reveal. But before you can even process that, the President of the United States sacrifices 1 year from the lifespan of every American to summon the Gun Devil and kill Makima.
Okay, let's party!
How fucking sick is that? And just when you're expecting some kind of catastrophic battle, we find out that the Gun Devil was mortally wounded, but was actually able to escape by taking over a dead body. But when Denji opens the door, we see none other than Hayakawa, who has now become the Gun Fiend. Just seeing Hayakawa like that is such a tragic moment, because even though we're witnessing his final thoughts through his delusional dreams, as a reader, we know that he's already dead, and that there's no going back. We don't even have a chance to process the death of this character, who we watched go from this hateful, single-minded person, to someone who's just so tired of seeing his loved ones die that he's willing to throw his own life away to protect them. And it's at this point that Denji begins his downward spiral, as he's forced to kill his best friend for the sake of saving innocent lives. There's this unnerving stillness to the next few chapters. After losing their closest friend, someone they considered family, Denji and Power seem to be carrying on like usual, but then the cracks begin to show, and we realize that Denji just isn't able to cope. He is in so much pain that he would purposefully give up his free will just so he doesn't have to think about how miserable he is. At the beginning of the story, Denji barking and acting like Makima's dog was kind of played off as a joke, But when he legitimately asks to just be a dog so he doesn't have to think for himself anymore, it's just genuinely upsetting to see someone degrade themselves like that. And just when I thought Denji was at his lowest point, Makima has him open the door and she kills Power right in front of his eyes. In utter shock and disbelief, Denji asks if this is all just a bad dream, some kind of fucked up nightmare that he can't wake up from. And Makima's response to this is to just laugh in his face. This was her plan all along, to make Denji so miserable, to scar him so deeply that he would never be able to live a normal life ever again, effectively nullifying the promise, or rather, the contract that he made with Pochita. Makima had been orchestrating all of the events in the story just to get Denji to this point. She planned for Aki to become the gun fiend. She made Denji open the door so that she can kill Power. And to put one final nail in the coffin, Makima reveals that Denji actually killed his own father. Something that I personally love about Chainsaw Man is the way that Fujimoto portrays his characters at their most emotionally vulnerable. When Aki breaks down after Himeno's death, when Denji is desperately trying to save Aki, and when Denji loses his will to live. These moments are all portrayed wordlessly in just a couple of hard-hitting panels. The sudden realization that your best friend just died, and the realization that you'd rather give up on life than live with the pain. All of these emotions are conveyed through characters and their expressions. No dragged out melodrama, no long-winded speech, no shonen power crying, just raw emotion. And while these moments only last for a few panels, their impact stays with the characters. And it's at this point that Denji just gives up. He literally ceases to be himself, as the next time we see him transform, he isn't the Chainsaw Man that we're used to seeing. No, this is something else. It's also here that Makima reveals her ultimate goal and the true nature of Chainsaw Man. Tell me, do you remember what the Nazis did to the Jews? In the world of Chainsaw Man, the answer to that question is no, because any devil that Chainsaw Man eats has their names erased from existence, and Makima wants to use that power to create a perfect world for humanity, a world devoid of hunger, war, disease, and even death itself. But before she can do that, she has to beat Chainsaw Man, because Makima can only control those she believes to be lesser than herself. And I just want to take a quick second to focus on this particular line, because as overpowered as Makima seems, this condition actually balances out her ability and gives some insight into the nature of the control devil. She can really easily control humans because, as she explains later, she loves humans in the same way that humans love dogs, implying that Makima views humans as pets or lesser beings. Okay, then what about when she controls devils? Well, when she first took control of Angel, it was only after she heard him say that he doesn't like using his powers to hurt other people. So in her mind, he wasn't even willing to fight back. The only reason she can control someone like Rezi is because Makima proved to herself that she could kill her. The nature of this constraint, along with the existence of Nayuta, implies that the control devil isn't necessarily strong by itself, but rather that it slowly amasses power over a long period of time by taking control of increasingly powerful beings. And I think it's really sick that Fujimoto could convey that idea with just a single line of dialogue and some context. It's also here that Makima reveals her contract with the Prime Minister of Japan, which allows her to revive herself after death by sacrificing the life of a Japanese citizen. Going back to the actual fight, Makima unleashes the human weapons, and do I even need to explain how fucking sick this fight is? People are getting bisected, flying through buildings and shit. Katana Man tries his signature move, but then he gets like reverse nothing personneled. Then Chainsaw Man gets blasted into space, so he rips out his heart and throws it back to Earth. And then he does the cool thing. And I know shit's getting hype, But let's actually take a step back for a second, because Makima actually mentions something really interesting here. Apparently, she had been fighting Chainsaw Man along with the human weapons and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but Chainsaw Man managed to escape after being severely wounded and transformed beyond recognition. Ugh, such a great way to tie it back to chapter 1. Makima checks her watch and notices that it's been an entire 7 chapters without the death of a beloved character. So, sorry Kobeni. But it looks like a little bit of Denji is still in there, because Chainsaw Man actually steps in to protect Kobeni and gets mortally wounded in the process. And it's here that we see the triumphant return of a character who was taken from us too soon. Someone who hasn't been gone for too long, but whose absence has felt like an eternity. And of course, I'm talking about Power. Oh yeah, and Power's back too. But in all seriousness, Power ends up actually reviving from the blood that Denji drank from her body. And after Power's inauguration as the first president, she actually makes a contract with Denji, giving him the last of her blood so that he can live on and look for the new Blood Devil. Alright, now before I continue on to the final battle, I just want to explain my one major criticism for Chainsaw Man, and that's the underdevelopment of certain characters. I want to start by setting down a baseline for what I think is proper development, and which characters do that right. So the majority of the main characters are developed very well. Just take the main trio for example. We know all of their backstories, and we see how the events in the story change them and their relationship with each other. But then for Makima, I think the one thing that's missing from her side of the story is just her origin. While we do understand her motivation, it would have been really cool to see the series of events that shaped her ideology and her stance on humanity. Because once again, with the context of Nayuta's character, we can see that the Control Devil doesn't inherently feel the need to control humanity, but that Makima, as an individual, has come to this conclusion. As for examples of side characters, I think Beam's character is totally fine, because he gets the appropriate amount of characterization for how important he is to the plot. He's only in the story for like 2 arcs before he bites the dust, but that's okay because there really wasn't much to him. Then there's Angel, who's in a lot of the story and plays a pretty important role, so he gets the appropriate amount of development as well as a backstory. Now this is all great, but on the other hand, you get characters like Santa Claus who, despite being the villain of her own arc, doesn't really get that much development or really much of a backstory. She doesn't feel like a fleshed out character by the end of her arc. Same thing with Katana Man and the Snake Chick. Considering that they're reoccurring characters for the early arcs, I assumed we would get some kind of insight into who they are as people, or maybe their backstories, but the last we see of this poor bastard before Makima makes him her bitch, he's getting his nuts stomped in by Denji and Aki. Oh yeah, and the octopus dude, what the hell was his deal? Like, he was able to go toe-to-toe with fucking Quanji, and I think he just disappears after the International Assassins arc. But I think my biggest gripe of all is Chainsaw Man's ability to erase things from existence by eating the devils associated with them. As sick as this ability is, I have to wonder, out of all the devils that exist, why does Chainsaw Man specifically have this ability? And while we're on that subject, why is Makima the only person who can remember some of the things that have been erased from existence? Now, I get that the answers to these questions aren't intrinsic to the story, but these are some of the unanswered questions that I feel are holding the story back, at least for someone like me. And the reason that I'm mentioning this criticism is because when we do get these backstories, when we do get these explanations, they always flesh out the characters and just make the overall story better. I think Quanji and her fiends are kind of underutilized in the main story, but there's this extra chapter about Quanji's past and her relationship with Kishibe that really fleshes out both of their characters and gives added context to some scenes. If we could have gotten just a couple more chapters to answer these questions and flesh out some of these characters, I think Chainsaw Man would have been pretty much perfect, at least in my eyes. Getting back to the story, we see Kishibe trying to prepare Denji for his last fight with Makima, and at first, Denji isn't too hot on the idea, because even after all the fucked up things that Makima put him through, Denji still can't bring himself to hate her. And for a lot of people, this is really frustrating, but to be honest, I can kind of understand where he's coming from. Because despite all of the horrific and inhumane things that Makima has done to Denji and literally all of the other characters, there are still a lot of smaller moments that actually make her kind of relatable. She drinks with the homies, she has a bunch of cute dogs that she named after fancy desserts, she even does little voices for them. And I mean, she even coughs when she smokes. Like, this character who we've seen inhumanely manipulate and kill people without batting an eye, who uses unspeakable powers of hell, still coughs when she tries smoking a cigarette for the first time. And at the end of the day, even if the life she gave Denji was all just a facade in service of her own goal, the happiness that Denji felt was real. After some consideration, Denji decides to face off against Makima one last time, but there's something he needs to ask her first. He asks if her perfect world will have bad movies, and when Makima says that the world would be better off without them, that's when Denji finds the resolve to kill her, because he realized that one of the most important aspects of true happiness is disparity. You need the lows to truly appreciate the highs in life. And that's the main conflict between Makima and Denji's ideologies. And it's with this line that we finally understand Denji's true feelings during his date with Makima. The reason he didn't enjoy most of the movies wasn't because he lost his humanity or anything like that. It was just because they watched a bunch of shitty movies. But when they actually saw a good movie, it seemed so amazing in comparison that it brought him to tears. As for why Makima's crying, we'll get into that a little bit later. Makima and Chainsaw Man fight for one last time, but Chainsaw Man seems to be weaker than usual. Disappointed by his lack of power, Makima gives him one last chance to kill her, but he just isn't strong enough. So Makima rips out Chainsaw Man's heart and finally achieves her dream. Until Denji comes out of nowhere and cuts Makima with a chainsaw made of Power's blood. Denji was actually able to split himself in two by removing Pochita from his own heart. And the only reason he was able to get the jump on Makima is because Denji realized that she doesn't actually recognize people by their faces, but instead, she remembers the scent of individuals she's interested in. And while Makima was infatuated by Chainsaw Man, she never actually cared about Denji. Even though the final arc is pretty long, in terms of Chainsaw Man at least, Denji and Makima's final confrontation ends pretty abruptly. And at first, I was kind of disappointed that they didn't talk a little more before she bit the dust. But then I remembered something that Denji said in chapter 71, that if he knew all the circumstances of the people he's killed, he'd probably feel really guilty about it, even if he was in the right. So I think it's actually intentional that Denji just ended the fight as soon as possible, and didn't even bother trying to reason with Makima or understand her motivations. He just accepts that ignorance is bliss. A lot of people were thinking that the ending was going to be really messed up and dark, but to everyone's surprise, it was just really wholesome, which is pretty crazy to see because these characters really do end up in some dark places. And to be fair, Denji eating Makima is honestly pretty fucked up. But in the context of the narrative, it's actually a win-win situation. Since Denji ate her while he was in human form, the Control Devil wasn't actually erased from existence. So the reason that Makima didn't revive is because she finally got her wish. In her mind, she was eaten by Chainsaw Man. Denji proved that he was stronger than her, so Makima finally accepted that Denji really is Chainsaw Man, and she chose to stay dead, which basically means that Makima, from the very beginning, set up a scenario where no matter what the outcome is, she would win regardless. Because if she beat Chainsaw Man, she could use his power to create a perfect world and be loved by all of humanity. But if she lost, then hey, she gets eaten by her idol, Chainsaw Man. What a conniving bitch. At the very end, we actually see that the Control Devil has reincarnated as a little girl named Nayuta. And a small detail that I want to bring up real quick is the timeline of events for the last chapter. So Denji eats Makima, and the Control Devil, Makima, dies. Considering the rules of this universe, this means that the Control Devil reincarnated in Hell, and then must have been killed pretty much immediately and reincarnated again on Earth. Unless I'm misinterpreting Denji and Kishibe's conversation, it doesn't sound like a lot of time has passed since Denji ate Makima, so yeah, I guess the Control Devil got spawn killed in Hell. And I guess it also means that Nayuta is literally like less than 1 year old, so fan artists beware. Before the last couple of pages, we get one final moment with Pochita, and he explains that this entire time, all Makima wanted was to build relationships with other people as equals, but that the amount of power she was given by the Japanese government and Public Safety Bureau corrupted her to the point that she lost sight of her original goal. That's why Makima was so obsessed with an insanely powerful devil like Chainsaw Man. It's why she seemed happy when Chainsaw Man killed her, and disappointed when he was easily beaten. All she ever wanted was an equal. But now, Denji has the chance to make sure that the Control Devil never goes through that ever again. He can give her the life that she always wanted. And as for how Denji's gonna do that, well, the answer was here from the very beginning. By giving her lots of hugs. While the story isn't quite as tight or self-contained as I personally would have liked, this is still easily one of my favorite manga. I think that this ending is still amazing because it stays true to the core of Chainsaw Man, while also evolving the narrative in a way that mirrors Denji's growth as a character. At the end of the day, it's still a story about finding happiness, but instead of the simple and idealized goals that Denji had in the beginning of the story, he realizes that life is unpredictable and you have to just enjoy what you have in the moment, because one day, it's gonna slip through your fingers. Life isn't always gonna be perfect, and sometimes you have to make compromises. Denji had to make the choice to either die at Makima's hand and let her control the world, or to kill Makima and allow disparity to remain a fact of life. I honestly have no clue where the series is going to go from here, but whatever it is, I really hope that it's great. Denji has not only grown as a protagonist, but he's also in a completely new position narratively. Now that he isn't on anyone's leash, he has much more agency and freedom to do whatever he wants. But at the same time, he's also entrusted with the responsibility of caring for someone. Nayuta seems pretty cool, and you can already tell they have a pretty fun dynamic, so here's to part 2. Hey, thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed. Over the last few months, Chainsaw Man has become a really special series to me, because it just appeals to me in so many ways, narratively, aesthetically, and conceptually. It's honestly pretty crazy. I feel like Fujimoto is writing this manga specifically for me. But it's really cool to see that so many other people feel the same way, and I'm glad that the series got so popular. And oh yeah, we're getting a fucking anime? What? I honestly had my doubts, but it's actually happening. And knowing that Studio Mappa is handling production, I gotta say, I'm pretty excited. Please do not fuck it up. And as for part 2 of the manga, man, I seriously have no clue where the hell the story is gonna go from here, but it would be really nice to get some answers regarding the nature of Chainsaw Man, as well as closure to some loose ends. I'm definitely going to do a video about the anime when that comes out. Not sure if I'll do like a first impressions, or if I'll be able to survive long enough to just do a video about the anime as a whole, but I guess we'll see when the time comes. Take care, you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Denji might be the Chainsaw Man, but motherfucker, I am the Chainsaw Stan.